I'm here now with André Alquerque from Católica University of Lisbon, and we will now start the fireside chat with all the speakers about products for good.
Welcome to our fireside chat on Products for Good. We have three goals with this conversation with our five guests. The first one is how we can include more environmental scopes in the products we build. The second one is how can we focus on inclusion and in products that have a change in society. And finally, how can we push more people into solving hard community-changing problems instead of sometimes useless apps. So I want to start with Mario. You're working at OutSystems, and OutSystems is in this forefront of democratizing a future where any company can easily build technology and include it in their core. So my question to you is, how do you see the future of digital transformation, and what advice do you give product managers when building products for companies that are still living in the past?
Hey everyone, thanks for the question. It's an interesting question, and I do have a bias. I work for a technology company, and we sell technology, and so my advice will be more applicable, perhaps, or my opinions will be more relevant for people with this mindset. I think the mission. I think something to aspire to is to become a cloud software company or act as a cloud software company. For example, like Amazon, where they push stuff to production. They push software to production every hour or every minute or whatever. Whatever this either hour or minute is an ambitious goal for most PMs that live in the past. And so I guess that's in my mind the objective, the longer term objective, to run as Google or Amazon or whatnot. Now, if a company, my assumption is that if a company lives in the past, as you said, if a company lives in the past, they potentially have people and technology because they have a PM there. Maybe the people are not well versed in the new technology that came out in the past years. Maybe they're using legacy technology and whatnot. So, people is a variable that they will need to touch. And second is the technology that they use, which is old. And the problem is that if you replace the technology, most likely you will have to replace people, and then everybody is afraid, and no one actually does anything to make this change. So there are solutions. There are solutions for this issue. There are multiple technologies out there that will enable you to take your own people and upgrade the team to act like a cloud software company. So that's I guess I'm not going to ramble. I don't want to continue rambling on, so I'm going to pause. But that's sort of the gist of my thoughts on this matter.
All right, appreciate Mario. So I'm going to pass the word now to Michaela. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. So you work at Volkswagen. If we think about the auto industry and technology, the first thing that comes to mind is self-driving cars. And that's a really exciting future, but it also comes with trade-offs. There's a lot of people who depend on driving. And the majority of product managers are always thinking on how good their products are going to be for the world and don't think as much about these trade-offs, the negative impacts. So my question to you is how important it is for product managers, product builders to think about the negative side of what they're building, and how do you believe they can add this into their scopes? How do you deal with this on your daily basis?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Andre. So it's as you said, sometimes we underestimate this, but we have a great impact on how the world works. you know, because as product managers, we define how things are going to work, and we build things that are going to influence the experience of the day-to-day life of people, right? And our main goal is to build products that help everyday lives, that make lives easier or more efficient. And we don't want long-term negative impact, but we rarely think about that, right? For me, for example, I see the social and environmental impact as the critical ones to consider when you think about, okay, how this would impact negatively people or the environment around us. And if you look at things, there are a lot of companies that have already started including points around the environmental impact, or social impact around their values or their OKRs, which then get trickled down to the product teams. And product teams take these on as, I don't know, social environmental KPIs, for example. In some cases, it's harder to quantify or even to predict the negative impact, right? And including this in your KPIs and in the scope, it serves as a direction, as guidelines, if you may, but it will not be exhaustive. Another thing that I consider valuable to introduce in our practice is frameworks that could help us evaluate whether products help or affect our users and the environment around in aggregate. So kind of like included in our day-to-day activities and in our day-to-day practice to measure not only how the product helps users, but also how it could impact negatively, and look at that. And there's another one which I think it should be super valuable, is in our discovery processes, to start looking at potential scenarios, you know, and think of potential scenarios of negative impact, and think of how we could solve that, think of how often they could happen, you know, what the risks could be. Fabrice mentioned it earlier in his talk about, you know, thinking about what could go wrong. And not only think about, okay, how this can be beneficial and useful, but how can it affect people and what could go wrong, and then think of scenarios of how to address that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, perfectly. So Tony, your company has worked with impressive clients such as Google, Intel, and Boeing, and particularly tackled really hard problems, especially in healthcare. Meanwhile, the large majority of new products we see in the market focus a lot on first world problems. My question to you is, how do you convince product builders to focus on hard problems? And what's your advice for those who are indeed tackling these really community-changing problems?
So, well, thanks, and hello, everybody. So I would say it has a lot to do with the language that we select in making these arguments. And I would say, by and large, our language is one of economics. And by that, I mean that there are alignments for solutions that are good for the world, good for people, that also happen to align with business goals. And I think one of the problems that I often see, especially in large organizations with young product managers or young UX designers, et cetera, is that they come at the problem from purely a language of doing good. And sadly, when you spend enough time doing research with real customers and users, you sometimes realize that they're not willing to pay for some of the better solutions that are better for them, whether it's green solutions, et cetera. And I think product managers can often undermine themselves by putting that kind of altruistic language forward, only to have the people that they believe they are serving say, no, I would not pay more for that kind of product. And so our approach, and I think where we've had the greatest success, is to speak the language of business and help people understand how they align those business goals with opportunities to really bring benefit and positive change into the world.
All right, so it's a change of habits basically that needs to be infused. Taking this, I want to ask Carolina. According to the WHO, this pandemic has created an additional 100 million people undernourished. I mean, you know your background on farming, and you know about what's producing food, and you're a researcher by heart. So my question to you is, what's the role of research in changing habits, in creating a society and products that enable a better consumption of food in this case? And how do PMs facing this obstacle of changing habits for product success, how do you tackle this?
Hi, thanks for the question. This is actually a very big question, right? So I think you're right. Like, I mean, today, in terms of sustainability, we have the technology, we have the means, we know how to make our products more sustainable, we know how to make our food production more sustainable, we know what would be green energy. But the blocker here is not the technology or anything else, it's really the behavior of people. So I think, first of all, when we think about food and agriculture, the good news is that there's a shift that is happening right now. So if you think about the different levels of a service blueprint, food production has been like at a very hidden back-end processes and nobody cared about, but this is changing. Now suddenly people want to know where their food is coming from, how it was produced, what kind of fertilizers were in there. So the interest is starting to happen. And now when we think about behavior change in this context, it's not just about the customer themselves, it's also about the stakeholders in the business, as well as us being responsible for products. And now I'm switching to my role that I'm playing besides my role as design researcher at Frog, because I actually have a background in farming. So I grew up on a farm. My family owns orchards, and I've been continuing doing this. And now I have my own fruit brandy distillery. And so what's interesting is that let's start with changing my behavior as somebody who is producing a product. So I said, yeah, I'm doing these brandies. I also want to make my brandies more sustainable. And so I started as a researcher, trying to understand, okay, what would that mean? Started talking to other farmers, started talking to potential customers or my customers of my brandies. And I realized, oh my God, this is so complex. I really need to expand the scope of the things I'm worrying about. Because before I cared about harvesting, distilling, bottling it. Now I'm suddenly also thinking about, how is my soil impacting the world? Like, what about all of the insects and birds that are living on my orchards? What about the machines? And even if you think about in digital terms, on our website, like even the server where I'm storing data has an impact in terms of carbon emissions. My packaging needs to be recycled if I truly want to be sustainable. So actually it takes a lot to be sustainable. And I wouldn't claim that with my little business on the side, I have achieved that. I'm trying. And I think that's true for any product. So rather than saying, let's tackle sustainability, we need to start thinking about bite-sized chunks, like not trying to solve the problem as a whole, but really start with small things. And to give you one example, what we've been thinking about is how can we make our bottles reusable? So we thought about, okay, which kind of bottle design kind of would invite our customers to reuse it. And a small success story, even though that's not something I anticipated, was that people actually did reuse the bottles, but as a vase for their flowers. So this is a little success story here. And when it comes to customers, I really believe that authenticity is key here. So it needs to be going beyond like corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility measures, and really create a story around the product where people can identify with. And then when it comes to the behavior change in the organization with our stakeholders, I totally agree with Tony that we need to work internally and try to understand like how we can have those difficult conversations to push our leaders in the organizations to change behavior, to think differently, help them envision a different future. And the question I always ask if somebody's struggling with that is, okay, what kind of news headlines do you want to make in the future? And then you quickly realize that nobody wants to make a news headline about, I don't know, something negative, but they're really looking to understand themselves as a leader also in that context. So I think these conversations, if you use storytelling tools like this kind of future casting exercise, that can really help have those conversations internally.
All right, thanks, Carolina. So I'm going to go over to Sabrina. This pandemic, and talking about shifts, this pandemic created a bit of havoc in education. Universities closed, classes online. You're working in ed tech, so education technology. And this pandemic seems like the accelerator that we've been waiting for quite a few years. Now, it's still a bit expensive for anyone to actually go and use a lot of these products that are now created. So my question to you is, what's your advice for product managers that should also focus in making their products more inclusive instead of being just margin or revenue focused? How do you increase the social impact of building new products?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. So, well, first of all, I think, and with that, I would like to jump on what Tony and Carolina said as well, that we need to shift, we as product managers when building products, but also the management and the organization itself, to communicate like the purpose, why we are building something. And if we get our customers and also our management to understand like what's the purpose behind what we are building, then I guess first of all, the customers are, for example, more willing to pay a higher price, for example, but they will also go the road down together with you. In terms of, okay, how can I make my product more inclusive and bring it and reach out more people especially in those days? I think there are maybe 3 points to that. The first one is that I think, and that applies especially also to your career, if you might have already noticed, that we can give a lot of what we are doing back for free to the community in the first place. So that means for me, for example, either cut your product in smaller pieces that don't hurt you so much, to give them away for free. So if you look at like the big player, for example, in businesses, like meaning Google, Facebook, Instagram, Wikipedia, all of those services that they offer, or most of them, are for free in the first place, are for free for the consumers. And the reason why they have a chance at the later point to monetize is that people, first of all, see the value in it, but the end users have also the possibility to try out things. Now, if we take that approach to your own product, and you are able to give away maybe a smaller cut from the cake, let's say again, out to your customers for free, you can make them see the value in that product first. And you create like a bigger range of diversity. So the more you make your product or your service accessible to the world, the more diversity you create. And I strongly believe in that, because the more people will get access to, for example, new knowledge or to new information. And with that, new ideas are created and new thoughts are created, and then new products are created. So it's like a self-driving machine that starts from the beginning and goes again and again. And then another thing is also, for your own products, you can think of who you monetize. So if you still want to make revenue and margins, you don't have to always look at your end customer or the B2C customer first. So again, if we take examples like Google or Facebook or Instagram, for example, they don't charge us as end users anything, but the B2B part, right? They make their money with ads and something like that. Or if, especially in educational technology, you can go with governments, you can talk with the city you're living in. So anyone who can subsidize or where you can get like funds for, or support your idea and the purpose that you're following. And I think with that, this is also something you have to think about. Who do you monetize in the first place? And then I think the next thing is also to make your product more inclusive to others. build a community, because the strongest thing that you can do today is providing a product that actually doesn't need any work or effort from your side to be created and to be filled with content. Again, this is also the same approach as many of the social network platforms follow, right? And if a community feeds content or provides the service itself, maybe already, you don't even have to charge anyone for that. So a community is easy to join, not easy to build, but easy to join. And once you have that, you can, you can also give your product more or less, or make it more inclusive for a lot of people if they just join the community then.
All right. I wished we had more time, so I want to appreciate every single one of our guests for their answers in a really important topic, which is to build products for making a better society. So thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go on now because we have a special announcement.